When I called my daughter to ask why she hadn't returned a single message in 3 weeks, she told me, calmly, like she was reading off a shipping confirmation, that she and her husband had gotten married last month. Then she asked me to have the mountain cabin deed put in both their names before they drove up for their honeymoon. Just take it to the attorney on Broad Street, Mom. Shouldn't take more than a day. I told her I'd look into it. 4 days later, I left something on their apartment doorstep that made her husband call me 11 times before 10 o'clock at night. My name is Laverne Pickett. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 32 years as a pediatric nurse at the same hospital in Chattanooga. You learn things in that work. You learn to read a room in the first few seconds. Which parent is scared? Which one is hiding something? Which child is in real pain versus performing it? I thought I'd gotten good at spotting the difference between a person who means you well and a person who is quietly taking inventory of everything you own. I was right about Rafferty from the beginning. I just took too long to do anything about it. My daughter Maris is 32. She has her father's jaw and my stubbornness, which in combination makes her both principled and immovable once she's decided something. She's an architect, not the kind who draws up plans and hands them off, but the kind who shows up at job sites in muddy boots to argue with the contractor. I raised her to be that way on purpose. Her father and I both did. Her father passed 4 years ago. Cardiac event, no warning. Tuesday here, Wednesday gone. I have not yet found a way to think about that directly, without the floor dropping out, so mostly I work around it. I keep the same coffee he preferred. I tend the garden he planted. On his birthday every year, I drive up to the mountain cabin and sit on the porch he rebuilt with his own hands and drink 1 cup while the fog burns off the ridgeline. The cabin is not large. 3 bedrooms, a fieldstone fireplace, a screened porch that looks over a hollow where deer come in the evenings. His grandfather built it in 1971. He added the back deck himself in 1998, the summer Maris turned 9. She learned bird calls from that porch. We'd sit there before breakfast with a field guide and binoculars, and she was fierce about it the way children are fierce about specific knowledge they've earned. She told me once that she wanted to get married up there someday, barefoot in the meadow past the tree line, with wildflowers instead of a real bouquet. I thought about that a great deal after she told me she'd already gotten married without me. She met Rafferty at a conference in Nashville 14 months before the phone call I'll never forget. She rang me that first night, and her voice was different, not giddy, but decided, like she'd resolved something. He actually listens, Mom, she said. Not like he's waiting for his turn, like he's actually listening. I asked what he did for work. Investment consulting, she said. Corporate assets, private portfolios. Vague, but Maris moved in professional circles I didn't fully understand, and she'd always had good judgment about people. I didn't push. I met him 6 weeks later, at my house. I wanted to see him on ground I knew, without the performance of a restaurant. I made the chicken and dumplings I've been making since 1987. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a compliment about my garden that was specific enough to seem genuine. He named the variety of black-eyed Susans along the walk, which you can't do if you're just flattering someone. Tall, dark-haired, a little too conscious of his own posture, the kind of handsome that has been told about itself. He asked about my nursing career. He asked about the house, and somewhere between the salad course and the main, he asked about the cabin. Maris mentioned you have a place in the mountains, he said. Somewhere in the Smokies foothills area? Just east of there, I said. Been in my husband's family since the 70s. Property values up that way have really climbed, he said. Especially anything with elevation and a view. You must be sitting on something worth 3 or 4 times what it appraised for when you came into it. Maris changed the subject. I let her. But I filed the comment the way I used to file an unusual bruise. Not alarming on its own, but worth watching. He mentioned the cabin again over dessert, asking about the road access in winter. And once more at the door when he was putting on his coat. Something about whether it was difficult to maintain a remote property alone at my stage of life. 3 mentions in one evening. Maris didn't seem to register it. I registered all 3. Over the months that followed, my daughter changed in ways that were each small enough to explain away individually. But that added up to something I couldn't name and couldn't stop watching. The daily lunch break calls stopped. She'd called during her lunch break since her first job out of college. Our conversations shortened. She stopped telling me about her projects at work, the ongoing arguments she had with her business partner about load-bearing calculations, the neighborhood cat that had taken to sleeping on her drafting table. Instead, I got status updates. Brief, neutral, like a company newsletter had replaced my daughter. When she told me about the engagement, she texted. A photo of a ring I didn't recognize and a message, he asked. Obviously, yes. We'll call soon. She did not call soon. I called her 3 days later. The ring is beautiful, I said, because that was true. He picked it out himself, she said, and her voice had something foreign in it. A flatness, like she was giving a recorded statement. When can we celebrate? Dinner, the 3 of us. A pause. We're keeping things low-key through the planning. Rafferty feels like outside opinions tend to create noise. Outside opinions, she meant me. I asked about the date. She said they were thinking spring. I asked if she needed help with anything. She said his sister was coordinating most of it. I asked 3 more careful questions and got 3 more polite deflections, and after we hung up, I sat in the kitchen without moving for a long time. In the months that followed, I received no invitation to venue visits or cake tastings. I saw engagement photos on her social media, professional ones, in a field somewhere, and noticed that in every single one of them, Rafferty was looking at the camera, not at her, not beside her, presenting her. My sister, who came down from Raleigh that winter, said the thing I hadn't let myself say. He's cutting her off from you deliberately, she told me. I've seen this. It moves faster than you'd expect. I told her she was probably reading into it. I didn't believe that when I said it. I said it because naming it out loud makes it real, and I wasn't ready for it to be real yet. Then came February. I was in the garage looking for a storm window screen when Maris called. I need to tell you something, and I need you not to make it a whole thing, she said. All right? Rafferty has been doing research on enmeshment. It's when adult children and parents have boundaries that are too blurry, and it creates problems in marriages later. He thinks our relationship has some of those patterns. The daily calls. The way I go to you when I'm stressed instead of working through things with my partner. He thinks it's been getting in the way. I was holding a storm window screen. I set it down carefully against the garage wall. Maris, I said, talking to your mother is not a clinical condition. Depending on her instead of your spouse is, she said. He showed me some research. He showed you research on why you should talk to me less. Silence. I want to be a good wife, she said quietly. And the cabin? I asked. I don't know exactly why I asked it then. Maybe because it had been sitting in the back of my throat since that first dinner. Has he mentioned anything about the cabin? A pause. He thinks it might make more sense for it to be in both our names at some point, so we can feel like it's actually ours. Right now, he says he feels like a guest in our vacation property. Our vacation property. It was her great-grandfather-in-law's land. It was where her father had dated every bird call she identified. I'll think about it, I said. I hung up and made 2 phone calls. First to my attorney to confirm I had not signed anything or amended the deed in any way. She confirmed I hadn't touched it. Second to a man who'd done investigative work for the hospital years back, insurance fraud cases. He was retired, selective, and thorough. I trusted his work when lives depended on it being accurate. Tell me who this man actually is, I said. Everything. He called me back 3 weeks later and asked to meet. We sat in a coffee shop near the library where I volunteer Tuesday mornings. He had a folder. He ordered nothing. He slid it across the table and waited while I read. The name was correct, Rafferty Holt, 36, originally from Knoxville. But the Vanderbilt MBA he'd mentioned to Maris's colleagues? He'd enrolled for one semester before withdrawing. The commercial real estate firm he'd supposedly managed a portfolio for in Atlanta? He'd worked there as a part-time leasing agent for 14 months. His current consulting practice had a registered address that was a shared mailbox service and had filed no tax returns in 2 years. "There's more," the investigator said. There was. In 2019, he'd become engaged to a woman in Birmingham who'd inherited a lake house from her parents. Her family grew suspicious after he'd added himself to her checking and savings accounts within 3 months of the engagement. Her brother found discrepancies in his employment history. The engagement ended quietly. No charges were filed. And then the last page. Rafferty Holt had been married before. He'd married a woman in Calhoun County, Georgia, in September 2020. A divorce filing had been initiated in 2021. It had never been completed. The case was still open in the county court records. He had married my daughter while still legally married to someone else. I drove home. I sat in my husband's chair, the one we bought the year Maris started kindergarten, reupholstered twice since then, and I thought about what to do next. Not from anger, though the anger was there. From the same clarity that comes at 2 in the morning in a pediatric ward when a child needs you and panic is not one of your options. What first? What next? What last? I was not going to call Maris, not yet. If I called her, she would tell Rafferty, and Rafferty would have hours, maybe days, to prepare his explanation. Men who've done this before know how to prepare. They've practiced on someone else first. I was going to give him no warning, and her no time to doubt what she was seeing. I spent 2 days organizing the documents my investigator had gathered. The Georgia marriage certificate, the divorce petition showing it had been filed. The court docket showing the case had never closed, never been dismissed, never resolved. He also provided a photograph, dated 8 months after Rafferty's elopement with Maris, showing him at a birthday gathering with the woman in Georgia, her arm through his, both of them relaxed and smiling toward whoever held the camera. He was not wearing a wedding ring in that photo. He had not told Maris this woman existed. I put everything in a manila envelope. I wrote on the outside in my regular handwriting, "For Rafferty and Maris, congratulations on the marriage. Please read together." I drove to their building on a Thursday afternoon and left the envelope at the front desk with instructions to deliver it when both residents were home that evening. Then I drove home, changed into comfortable clothes, made a proper dinner, and ate it at my kitchen table while the birds worked the feeder in the backyard until the light failed. The first call came at 8:47 p.m. Rafferty. I'd saved his number from the one time he'd texted about Christmas scheduling. He did not say hello. "What is this?" His voice was high and stripped of its usual smoothness. "What is this you put in our mailbox?" "Congratulations on your marriage," I said. "Both of them." "You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what you've done." "I gave my daughter accurate information about the man she married," I said. "What she does with it is her decision. She's not going to believe any of this. She knows me." "She knows the version of you that you built for her," I said. "Whether that's the same thing is a conversation for the two of you." He hung up. 4 minutes later, he called back. I didn't answer. He called 9 more times across the following 2 hours. I did not answer any of them. Maris called at 10:14. Her voice was open in a way it hadn't been in months, cracked through the middle. "Mom." Just that, and then a silence that lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "I'm here," I said. "Is it real?" she asked. "The papers, the Georgia case. Is it real?" "Yes." He's saying it's a clerical error, that the divorce was finalized and the records are just wrong. I'd expected that answer. The court docket is public record, I said. The case number is on the papers. You can look it up yourself tonight. Silence. I could hear her breathing. He's in the kitchen right now, she said. Her voice dropped low. He's on the phone. He keeps saying, I can fix this. Maris, I said carefully, do you have somewhere you can go tonight that isn't there? A pause then. Can I come to you? You never have to ask me that, I said. She arrived after midnight with a duffel bag and the look of someone who hadn't blinked in 4 hours. I made chamomile tea. We sat at the kitchen table where she'd done every year of her homework, where her father had taught her to read a topographic map the summer before he died, and she read through every page of the folder I'd laid out. She didn't cry until she got to the photograph. He said he'd been single for 5 years before we met, she said. I know. He said his ex, he only ever said girlfriend, never wife, that she'd been controlling, that he'd had to get out of something difficult. I know. She turned the photograph face down on the table. How long did you know something was wrong? I told her the truth, since the first dinner, when he asked about the cabin 3 times. She closed her eyes. I thought you just didn't like him. I didn't like what I saw when I looked carefully at him, I said. That's a different thing. We talked until close to 3 in the morning, and most of it wasn't about Rafferty at all. It was about her father, about the summers at the cabin, about a yellow-billed cuckoo she'd identified from the porch when she was 11. We'd had to look it up twice to be sure, and how her father had written it in the field guide margin, in his cramped handwriting, and put the date beside it. I told her the field guide was still on the shelf above the cabin door, exactly where he'd left it. She hadn't known I'd kept it there. She slept in her old room. I didn't sleep much. I lay in the dark and thought about what we lose when we aren't paying attention, and what comes back when we stop being too afraid to reach for it. The legal situation moved faster than I'd expected. Maris retained an attorney the following week. The Georgia marriage, which had never been formally dissolved, meant her own marriage had been legally void from its beginning. She had never technically been married at all, which was simultaneously a relief in its own particular kind of grief. The woman in Georgia was contacted by authorities. She had not known Rafferty had remarried. She had been trying through that still open filing to reach a resolution he had deliberately stalled. There were charges, bigamy in Tennessee, fraud charges connected to financial access he'd quietly established on 2 of Maris's accounts in the months before they eloped. Transfers small enough to look like fees, amounts that added up to something that wasn't. I sat with Maris in the courthouse hallway on the day of the hearing. We didn't talk much. She had her hands folded in her lap the way she used to fold them before piano recitals. Tight, controlled, ready. Do you want to go in? I asked. No, she said. I just want it finished. It was finished in under an hour. We drove to a diner afterward and ordered breakfast food even though it was past 2 in the afternoon, and she ate every bite of her eggs and then stole half my toast the way she's done since she was 4 years old, and I let her, same as I always have. That was 8 months ago now. She moved back to Chattanooga. Not into my house. She found a rental 10 minutes away, which is exactly the right distance for 2 women who know each other too well to live on top of each other. She went back to the firm she'd left at Rafferty's suggestion. Her business partner apparently said, on her first day back, that he'd been covering for her for 14 months and would appreciate it if she never did that to him again. And then he bought her coffee. She told me that story 3 times because it made her laugh each time. We talk every day, not always long, sometimes just a few minutes while she's walking between job sites, but the calls are real again. She tells me about her projects. She asks my opinion on things. She doesn't always take it. I don't always expect her to. Last month, we drove up to the cabin together, First time for either of us since the autumn before everything happened. The last mile and a half of road is unpaved, and it had been a wet spring, so we took it slowly. She was driving. I watched the tree line shift from second-growth pine into older hardwood, and thought about every other time I'd made this drive, with her asleep in a car seat, with her asking questions about every hawk we passed, with her father's hand resting on my knee while he drove, and the radio playing something neither of us remembered afterward. We opened the cabin and aired it out, and swept the kitchen and built a fire, even though it wasn't cold enough to really need one. She found her father's field guide on the shelf above the door, exactly where I'd said it would be. She opened it to the margin note, his handwriting, the date, yellow-billed cuckoo, Coccyzus americanus, heard first, then found on the dead oak at the hollow's edge, and she stood there reading it for a long time without saying anything. Then she put it carefully back on the shelf, spine out, so she could see the title when she walked past. We sat on the porch until full dark, and the birds came up from the hollow the way they always do in the evening, and she named every call without hesitating. She hadn't forgotten a single one. Some things, it turns out, you don't lose. You just put them down somewhere safe and trust they'll still be there when you come back for them. She knew where everything was. That's all I ever needed to know.